Welcome, everybody. I really thought there were going to be more people here today based on what we have to offer,
You have
but
to use the courtroom.
those,
That's the big problem.
yeah, so for those of you who haven't been to anything before, and this is the first thing that you've been to, this isn't indicative of what we have for a crowd. We have all kinds of things going on this week, including the law review symposium tomorrow. There are people in class. The schedule's kind of unworkable for student organizations, frankly, but we thought we'd give Thursday night a try, and here we are. So I'd just like to start with reading the Federalist Society mission statement. The Federalist Society is a nonpartisan, conservative, and libertarian organization dedicated to fostering balanced and open debate about the fundamental principles of freedom, federalism, and judicial restraint. The Federalist Society seeks to educate the legal community through its programs and publications about how limited constitutional government based on the rule of law can have a positive effect on law and public policy. And I don't think I've read that in its entirety because we've been rushed at every single event this year. But I'd much rather say what that means, because I think I haven't said what the Federalist Society represents and embodies at these events before. And basically, what it doesn't mean is a room full of people in agreement on a certain issue, and maybe we get a few in and change their mind. What it does mean is a room full of people with different ideas. So yes, it says conservative and libertarian organization, sure. I want everybody in here. The Federalist Society wants everybody in here. Liberal, conservative, libertarian, everywhere in between. It's difficult to make an informed decision about anything unless you have all the information. So we welcome everybody here with all viewpoints. And interestingly enough, people joke with me and call this the Republican Federalist Society. I was like, no, that's not true at all. If you speak to a list of our speakers about an issue, you're going to get a range of viewpoints. And you might find one that Democrats are going to agree with and Republicans are going to disagree with, and vice versa. So it's a diverse group of people and opinions as far as the Federalist Society is concerned. And everybody's invited to give their input in the audience. So basically, we've got a small crowd. I say we just have some fun. Any of you that are interested, the Law Review Symposium is tomorrow, and these gentlemen will be speaking there. And I don't know if you'll have as much fun and face-to-face, head-to-head with them as you can here. And you're welcome to disagree with them and question them on anything that comes up. That said, oh, and our Scotch and Cigar Night is after this at Fanatico, and I know that there's going to be more people at that. So there are order forms out for that as well. It's only $10. You get to try some scotch. We'll have cigars for sale, and
I got some really good cigars.
you got some really good cigars at cost.
Probably
is
some
what
good
you're getting.
appetizers.
Yes, there's going to be food, appetizers. If you don't like scotch, come anyway. We'll talk. All right. So the topic is what's worse for our political system, gerrymandering or the campaign donation restrictions. So one of the gentlemen thinks one is the worst ever, the other one thinks the other is the worst ever. Small audience, let's not be shy. By show of hands, who thinks that gerrymandering is the worst ever? Everybody know what gerrymandering is? Oh, there's going to be there's a picture to see the goofy looking districts. That's,
Can one be opposed to both?
yeah, there you go. And then campaign contributions. Who thinks that's the worst ever? Some people have no opinion. All right, well, we'll take a poll again at the end. So
The rest think the party mascots are the worst part.
Well, there's.
okay. So I'm just going to let Ilya Shapiro start, and they're going to lay a foundation, and then we're going to kind of have an interactive
All right, well, thank you so much for having me. This is, I think, the now endowed Ilya Shapiro Speaker Series. Apparently, it's my 5th straight semester speaking here. I love this place. Our guests, the FedSoc officers, love having me. Either way, it's a mutual admiration society, I suppose. Although I am thrown off, this is my first time appearing not in the courtroom. I sort of honed my craft, and I sort of choreograph my presentation tonight for the spacing and the dimensions and the acoustics of the courtroom. So if Christian gets the better of me, I wholly blame those considerations. Campaign finance, you know, this is so bad, because what is campaign finance? It's the government telling you how much and about what you can speak in a political context. It's so preposterously against the First Amendment. I mean, it's hard to conceive of anything that could possibly be worse. I mean, Christian will tell you a sordid tale about misinterpretations of certain statutory law, and they draw these weird things, and you know, that's all well and good, and that's, you know, some technocratic problems here. But here, you're talking about government management of political speech. That's pretty bad in the American context, right? You have to think about who bears, for any government action, the burden of justification, right? Is it the individual exercising their rights, or is it the government trying to restrict those rights? In any context. I'm not just talking about, you know, speech or the First Amendment. You know, I'm talking about the right to bear arms, you know, whatever you want. You know, getting out of bed on the left side versus the right side in the morning. You have to, you know, can the government come in and just restrict you? There has to be some sort of justification. And here, the First Amendment is quite clear in protecting speech and press activity, for that matter, without regard to the nature of the speaker. So, you know, it's not a matter of only people who are professional writers and communicators have the right to the freedom of speech, or the freedom of speech about political issues. It's not just, you know, to have to be protected by the press clause, you have to wear a fedora with the word press in it. Or, you know, updated for modern times, you know, the court interpretation would be if your Facebook page has over, you know, 786 likes, or whatever the sliding scale might be in a given area. Or, more specifically with, you know, federal contribution limits, if you donate to $2,600 to a candidate, you're exercising your, you know, freedom to be involved in political activity. If you donate $1 more to that candidate, you should be locked up and thrown in jail because you're corrupting that candidate. I mean, it's arbitrary, it's bizarre, and there's certainly no justification. Before Citizens United and its companion case out of the DC Circuit, speechnow.org, you had to ask the government for permission, and they would say no, about getting together with a friend or two and contributing to speaking on political issues. Before McCutcheon, that was decided last week, you had to ask the government for permission, or rather the government prevented you from maxing out your contributions to, you know, you were allowed to max out to 9 candidates and give $1,800 to another one, and then $1 more to any other candidate. You know, you donate to candidates, you know, 1 through 9, and $1,800 to candidate 10. If you give $1 more to some candidate from far flung across the country, candidate number, you know, 435, you are corrupting the system. You know, now that at least has been lessened. I think we're generally going in a positive direction in the campaign finance area because the original sin of Buckley versus Vallejo is gradually being chipped away at, and kind of the monstrosity of McConnell of McCabe-Feingold that was laid on top of that a decade ago is being chipped away at. But still, you have this idea in the jurisprudence that limiting or restricting contributions to parties, candidates, campaigns is a good thing, is a way to prevent corruption of some sort. Even though Americans spend more money each year on chewing gum and Halloween candy than they do on political campaigns. Even though Americans spend 10 or 12 times more on lobbying on the back end than they do on campaigns on the front end. Even though there is no, before Citizens United, campaign spending of which to speak by, you know, big for-profit corporations, the Fortune 500, because they don't want to piss off half of their customer base, right? Like Michael Jordan, when he was criticized for not getting involved in politics or speaking out about certain civil rights legislation or what have you, he said, well, Republicans buy sneakers too. And so decisions like Citizens United and other decisions that liberalize the political speech area don't benefit these big, corporations that people are afraid of, or these big bugaboos. Pick whichever one you don't like. It helps the National Rifle Association and Planned Parenthood and the National Federation of Independent Business, small business organizations. The little guys, to the extent you care about leveling the playing field, campaign finance regulations do the opposite. Now we turn to disclosures. Because I think we're going to a system, incumbents are seeing that there's a lot of independent speakers, as there should be super PACs, advocacy groups, what have you. And parties and candidates are at a relative disadvantage because of that. McCutcheon helped that a little bit, but there are only 630 people who maxed out the aggregate contribution levels anyway, so McCutcheon's not really going to have that big of an impact on money in politics. But still, you might have seen that Stephen Colbert skit with Jon Stewart a couple of years ago for the 2012 cycle, right? At first, Colbert started the Super PAC, Americans for a Better Tomorrow. But then he decided he was going to run for President of the United States of South Carolina. And of course, under federal law, he cannot coordinate with himself. No. So he had to transfer control of the Super PAC to Jon Stewart. There was this big presentation, they held hands, and there was this animation sequence where the money little green dollar sign flowed from Colbert to Stewart, and then Stewart said, I have the powers, like one of these He-Man sort of things, cartoons, right? Because nudge, nudge, wink, wink, now, Colbert would be pure and the Super PAC would be independent, and we go through these machinations. I mean, Colbert is absolutely right to lampoon this stuff. It's bizarre. And it's all because we fear this dark money, this money in politics. The people that are criticizing the shadowy billionaires then go on to attack certain billionaires. So I don't understand where the concern about who's funding all this stuff comes from. And as for the disclosure regime, this is, I guess, I've already mentioned that. I'll use this whiteboard. PowerPoint is unconstitutional, so I'm not going to do that. But let me illustrate something about the absurdity of the current disclosure regime or any proposals for further disclosure. First of all, let's say I run DeKalb widget manufacturers, okay? I donate money to the Illinois widget manufacturers. I also donate money to the DeKalb Chamber of Commerce, okay? DeKalb Chamber of Commerce gives money to the Illinois Chamber of Commerce and to the, Illinois Widget Manufacturers gives to the National Widget Manufacturers. Illinois Chamber of Commerce gives to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Then both of these organizations, U.S. Chamber gives to the Hawaii Chamber of Commerce, who gives to the where are we here? Honolulu, say, Chamber of Commerce, who put some money into an independent ad for Hawaii State Ledge. Similar tale here, the National Widget Manufacturers gives to the Hawaii Widget Manufacturers, who gives to the Honolulu Widget Manufacturers, who spent money on an issue ad in the Hawaii state legislative race, or any other state, right? Doesn't do anything for the voter to know that my money, tied through this elaborate chain, is going to some Hawaii state legislative race. Do you think that this person, that me, running the widget manufacturers in DeKalb, is trying to influence the Hawaii state ledge through either the widget manufacturer chain, the Chamber of Commerce? This is much simplified. The actual way that the money flows is much different. So that's at the kind of institutional PAC level. You could tell a similar tale about individual disclosures. Brandon Ike had to resign recently from Mozilla because it turns out that he gave $1,000 to the Prop 8 forces. Now, I'm for marriage equality, but it seems to me that there's no purpose served by California's law, which says you have to disclose donations over $100, federal laws over $200, who you are, where you live. The public's interest certainly might be in knowing, the very big sums, the Charles Kochs and the George Soroses and so forth, over some, huge limit. But some little old lady giving $20 or even Bryn Knight giving $1,000 out of a multi-million-dollar campaign really isn't corrupting anyone. And of course, Prop 8 isn't anyone, it's a proposition. How do you corrupt a proposition? So, as the Supreme Court has ruled in the past, NAACP versus Alabama, for example, the freedom of association, freedom of anonymous association is very important, and it only starts getting potentially outweighed by the public's interest, like the government needs to protect the public's interest in the confidence or the integrity of elections. And that's only the perception thereof, not the actuality, is at very high level. So there's a whole lot of stuff wrong with our campaign finance regime, running from the censoring of political speech, which is at the core of First Amendment, to the enabling of harassment and boycott and shunning campaigns, rather than simply allowing the citizenry to monitor the government. As Chief Justice Roberts said in his concurrence in Citizens United, the First Amendment protects more than the man on the soapbox and the lonely pamphleteer. And because it does, our campaign finance system is bizarre and wrong and the worst thing about American politics.
Thank you. I forgot to tell everyone who this gentleman is. He's been here so many times. He kind of covered it, but up next is J. Christian Adams of the Election Law Center, founder of the Election Law Center, and I'll let him tell you what else is pertinent, but just to introduce him.
I get to do my own biography.
Yes.
Love it.
However
Okay.
you want.
Well, a little secret is any speech you go to, the speaker really is doing his own biography anyhow, so I guess instead of typing it, I get to say it. I was the Justice Department in the voting section for 5 years, and I litigated a whole bunch of different election cases there. After I left the voting section, I continued to litigate voting cases. I've represented presidential campaigns. Everyone always asks who. I say Gingrich, Santorum, and Huntsman. And the strange part about that is I did it simultaneously. That's a whole other story.
So you were coordinating with yourself, or against yourself?
And conflicting with myself all at the same time. I have cases in voting cases right now, ranging from the island of Guam, which actually has a federal court, believe it or not, to, I guess, the furthest east case I have is probably somewhere in Indiana. So I'm suing the state of Indiana right now also. So this is all I do is election. Now, when people say election law, they always think what Ilya just talked about, campaign finance. And in reality, what I'm going to talk about is something very, very different. And frankly, since that's why we're here to debate, far more dangerous than what's going on in campaign finance. Now, the first thing I want to ask everybody is who thinks America, don't be shy, everybody's hands will go up, who thinks America today is more divided than it was 30 years ago? Everybody does. There's nobody who doesn't. We all think America is more divided now than it was 30 years ago. And if you think that, then you think...
I was in kindergarten, Christian, I can't really speak.
Well, okay.
These kids
20 years
born.
ago.
They weren't born.
20 years ago. But you read history. You know what's going on. If you think America's more divided now, then you're going to agree with me when I'm done with this. Because one of the reasons for the division of America are the things I'm going to talk about. It has nothing to do with campaign finance. The things I'm going to talk about affect your daily lives. The things I'm going to talk about are tearing at the fabric of the country. Because I disagree with you, Ilya, that campaign finance is a terrible state of play. In fact, the things you just heard about, the law involving campaign finance as it stands this week, to me, is bluebirds, rainbows, and unicorns. Everything's looking up. There isn't much to be worried about. Oh, so you can't give more than a couple $1,000s. Ooh, big deal. You can give a whole lot of extra money, but after McCutcheon, you can spread it out far and wide. You can engage in Citizens United independent expenditures to your heart's content. And here's the dirty little secret. In 2014, all of you in this room can have as much effect on the political debate through the internet, through social media, through however you go about it, than 20 years ago a $300,000 get out the vote campaign would have. So there are so many tools to bypass these pesky campaign restrictions. A couple other reasons why, and before I get into the redistricting issue, why I think that campaign finance is not that big of a deal. First of all, there's parity. Campaign finance is like the NFL, right? The Seahawks won the Super Bowl. The Saints won the Super Bowl, right? The unions and business and dark money and bright money is all at parity. There's a standoff. Nobody has an advantage. The Cardinals went to the Super Bowl, right? Like, he who was once low will be raised. And the Bears, well, you know, the Bears are the Bears. And so, you know, there is a sense of parity in campaign finance where everybody is essentially at a stalemate.
Parity or parity? Because I think there's both.
Well, there's probably both of them. The last thing why campaign finance is not that big of a deal is because money always finds a way to flow, right? You set up a barrier here, you say you can't do a certain thing. Ingenious minds find a way around it and you end up with the net amount of money in politics essentially being the same. So it's a avoidable bureaucracy because everybody finds a way to avoid it. So for these main reasons, I think it's bluebirds, rainbows, and unicorns in campaign finance. Let me tell you about something far more dangerous that's dividing the country. Yes?
I hate to cut you off, but since you talked so much about that, and we wanted to kind of engage the audience a little bit, can we just cover a little bit more of that if anyone has questions, and then you can go on and talk about your issue specifically as far as gerrymandering. Does anyone have any questions for either of the gentlemen about specifically the campaign finance issue? Or just, does anybody? Otherwise I'll just go. So, well, my question for either of you is that, you know, yes, it's balanced out because, you know, at this point, it's not a bunch of rich old Republicans. There's everybody rich on both sides contributing to campaigns. But as far as just the rich versus the poor overall, what do you say to people who say, you know, people with money don't have nearly the amount of influence, you know, a common argument that elections can be bought now that you could basically give money to every single candidate and then you have the whole Congress beholden to you.
Well, that was a question probably directed to Ilya, but let me answer it my way. If you don't think poor people have influence in campaigns, let me take you to some places in Alabama and Mississippi where I've monitored elections as a DOJ election monitor. Now let me take you to the south side of Chicago on election day.
Oh yeah, I know that.
And I'll show you how poor people flex their political muscle. Okay? So this idea that poor people don't have a voice and don't have political power is an absolute myth that's being cooked up by the people who want to control speech.
There are different types of political power and political influence. I mean, saying that the rich have more power than the poor, they do in terms of donations. That's just measuring donations in terms of political power. Look at you know, the media. What kind of messages come out of the media, whether broadcast or print or what have you. You know, that there's more competition on the internet, but you know, the fairness doctrine has gone away. It would be held unconstitutional now if it came back. That is the requirement that if you broadcast a particular opinion, you have to give equal time to the other side. But surely it can be argued that you know, I don't know, the New York Times, when it goes on and on about a particular issue from a particular perspective, it's wielding really strong influence that you know, the other side doesn't have. Incumbency, the power of incumbency, you know, being able to effectively send campaign literature for free, called franking, back to your constituents.
Now there are rules. It's not campaign material.
Well, it says, look what I'm doing. I've introduced this bill, I've introduced this bill, and I'm back and, you know, opening this plant, and I've, you know, got this earmark back for the district and things like this. Name recognition. I mean, there's all sorts of advantages to incumbency, and indeed, it's the incumbents that write by definition, the campaign finance laws, which is why since the advent of the modern campaign finance regime, the amount of money on the sides of the incumbents versus challengers have gone from pretty much parity, maybe a little bit of advantage to incumbents, to about 4-to-1 in favor of the incumbents.
But what Ilya leaves out is the rise of the modern campaign finance regime was simultaneous with the rise of things I'm going to talk about, which is racially gerrymandered districts, through the 1982 amendments to the Voting Rights Act. And after and let me pick up back on the record groove here. Listen, all of the unlimited amount of money, or even if it's limited, okay, whatever amount of money there is for campaigns, still has to pass through a bottleneck of election process issues, of things such as the districts you keep seeing flashing on the screen, how you run, where you run, who are your constituents, the voter rolls, citizenship verification. Are citizens registering to vote only, or are non-citizens registering to vote? You know, in this last election, 2012, there were 5 million ineligible voters on the rolls in the United States. 5 million dead people and ineligible people. You may say, well, how do we know they voted? We do. Many of them did vote. You have people like Louise Richardson in Cincinnati voted 6 times, and we know this because she said so on camera on the CBS affiliate, that she committed 6 federal felonies in the 2012 election because people were on the rolls who should not have been. Now, what gerrymandered districts are, when you see those crazy looking districts that flash up, are like a cockroach, okay? It is a singular sign of a bigger problem. The gerrymandered districts are there, and I'll get into how they happen and why they're bad in a minute, but they're indicative of an entire onslaught on election process issues by the same people who are keeping the voter rolls dirty, by the same people who want non-citizens to be voting in your elections like they do in Chicago for school board, by the same people who don't want criminal prosecutions of people who commit election crimes. These same people that are behind gerrymandered districts have a much wider net. The gerrymandered districts are one cockroach, but behind the cabinet are things you guys don't ever hear about, involving process issues that are all part of this enormous effort to, yeah, okay, $1 billion in campaigns or $1 in campaigns. It doesn't matter. They control the process whereby we elect our politicians. And while there's parity in campaign finance between one side and the other, well, the law is moving in the right direction if it's not already there. There's this much more existential battle going on below the surface where racially gerrymandered districts are a symptom of the battle. Now, why do we have districts like this? We have districts like this because the people who I talked about, and I can name them, but groups like the ACLU is a great example, want to pack minorities into districts so we elect people based on their skin color, right? You win the election because you're Hispanic. We anoint this to be a Hispanic district. In other words, it's taking skin color and giving out political benefits based on the skin color. Now, I brought cases when I was at the Justice Department to sue jurisdictions to create minority districts. Because there's this strange area of the law where you actually have to create a race-based district in order to alleviate constitutional guarantees of not being judged by race, right? Welcome to Wonderland. But that's the law right now. And so you get groups like the NAACP aggressively pushing these outcomes because they want to elect people based on the color of their skin. And what it has done, now think about this for a minute, what it has done has created a divided America where you have people elected from those districts that could never win statewide. If Barack Obama had beat Bobby Rush for House in Chicago when he ran against Bobby Rush in the primary, he would have never been elected President of the United States. Why? Because to win in one of those districts, you have to become radicalized. You have to appeal to an entirely different electorate than you would if those districts were drawn differently. You cannot name a single congressional candidate who was elected in one of these districts that ever won a statewide election. It's never happened. And these districts started getting drawn after the 1982 Voting Rights Act amendments, which was very similar to the era of post-Watergate campaign finance reform. So when you talk about a polarized Congress, what you have are bleached out white districts, especially in the South, and then you have districts where they're set aside for racial minorities. And so you create this divided America where the racial minority candidate does not have to appeal to any white voters in the district, and the white candidate outside that crazy district doesn't have to appeal to any minorities, right? You just have to run with your own race, and you win. And so it's created a situation in America where we are greater divided on the basis of race and ideology and radicalism rather than e pluribus unum rules the day. So I would ask you, what's worse, right? The parity we have in campaign finance, where occasionally New Orleans wins the Super Bowl, where everybody pretty much finds a way to get their money in the game, or a divided nation. And I think the answer is pretty clear, which one's worse. So, thank you.
Okay.
Let's have some questions.
Real quick though, you guys, there's a ton of food out there. I noticed
don't get in the way of food. Go get food, come back, we'll have some more discussion.
Yeah.
Thank you for your question.
Because I've been smelling it.
BP with money.
No.
Without my minimum.